Hey, how's it going everyone? This is Dominick from the Comic Book Report over here doing another guest review for organicpricedbooks.com. Yes, I'm back with another Marvel Omnibus overview. Today we're taking a look at the newly released X-Treme X-Men Omnibus Volume 2. This concludes Chris Claremont's run on this book. And definitely an underrated little book here. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the book itself. The issues in this volume were written by Chris Claremont and penciled primarily by Juan Babio, Igor Cordy, and more. The comics in this volume were published by Marvel Comics beginning in 2002. As far as what it collects, this omnibus includes Mechanics issues 1 through 6, X-Treme X-Men issues 25 through 46, X-Women issue 1, and material from X-Men Unlimited issue 39. This is an oversized hardcover edition with glossy print paper stock, a sewn binding, and a total of 816 pages. Okay, transitioning over to the front cover now, I will say I have the direct market edition for this omnibus. I'll go ahead and throw up a quick thumbnail of the standard edition just so you can compare the two covers and figure out what you would like for yourself. Please note the only difference in these omnibuses is this front cover of the dust jacket and the image that's included on the bottom half of the spine. Outside of that, both editions of this release should be identical. And speaking of that spine, here we go. It is a white field with that great red and yellow X-Treme X-Men logo right in the middle, the Marvel Omnibus logo, the creators, the picture we talked about, and a number 2 indicating the second of 2 volumes in this run. Luckily, this does match up quite well with the volume 1 for those that are collecting these in sequence. Similarly, the back of the omnibus as well matches up quite nicely to what came before. We have the great thumbnailed covers of everything included in this omnibus. We have a description, a blurb about the book, pricing information, what it includes, things like that. It should be noted there is not a parental advisory for this omnibus. It's not overly graphic, though there are instances of violence and some character models that might be a bit risque for some readers. But other than that, as I mentioned, no parental advisory of any kind on this book. It is officially rated T+. Anyway, let's go ahead and take a look at that dust jacket. This time I'll show you the interior flaps so you can just see everything at a glance. Again, this is the direct market dust jacket cover for the book. Again, both look pretty striking though. I was really happy to have gotten either. And after we take a look one last time at the dust jacket itself, we will transition over to the Under the Dust Jacket hardback book itself. What we have in this case is a printout of a lot of the team roster against a kind of fun red decorative background. Again, this isn't too striking or anything like that. We basically have an image on the front and the back with just some of the character models. This is honestly a nice way to do Under the Dust Jacket hardback art. It's not quite a wraparound and we don't have necessarily a big action sequence or anything like that, but it is cool to see the characters just right there printed on the book. I do think it looks quite sharp. Okay, now just transitioning for a quick look at the binding. I will say my copy didn't have much of an eye. This is after one full read through. Maybe a little bit of gutter loss here. Nothing too critical or beyond the ordinary or expected for these Marvel Omnibus editions. I didn't really have to pull the pages apart to read too much. There's, again, a little bit in the gutter, but nothing too bad. Okay, now that we've talked about the build of the book and the binding, we can go ahead and jump into the collection proper. So we have some great end pages here, title page, publication information page, then we have your standard kind of creator breakdown page. This is what we have in lieu of a proper page table of contents, and then we go right into the actual comics in the book. I will say how this thing is mapped is we start off with the first 6 issues of that Mechanics miniseries that follows Kitty Pryde before jumping into the remaining X-Treme X-Men comic book run. We go from issues, 25 to 46, something like that. Then we have a little excerpt from that X-Men Unlimited issue, and then the omnibus concludes with the X-Women issue, followed by a really small little gallery of extras at the back, which I'll get to in a little bit. Okay, so let's talk about this book a little bit. So this is the second half of Chris Claremont's X-Treme X-Men run. For those that don't know, I actually did review the volume 1 of this omnibus series, both on my channel in full detail and a quick overview like this, actually on the Organic Price Books YouTube channel as well. But this run was basically coming out in the early 2000s and happening right around the same time as Grant Morrison's new X-Men run. So we do have some crossover with that series and those characters. I felt it a little bit more in volume 1, but there are definitely a few instances where the events of that series kind of affect this one. But again, other than that, that's just kind of your context, time and place for when this was occurring. But as far as this volume goes, like I said, it picks up right where the last one let off, except for we actually start with that Mechanics miniseries following Kitty Pryde. Now, if you're wondering, you don't need to read a whole lot before enjoying this omnibus, other than the volume 1, which I would recommend. Perhaps the only other recommendation I would have is to read the beginnings of Morrison's new X-Men as well, because there is a fairly big event that has implications for Kitty Pryde toward the beginning of that run. At any rate, Mechanics picks up with Kitty kind of in the wake of things that happened during the Morrison era, and she is just kind of trying to find herself. She's left all the X-Men, she's in kind of court-mandated therapy, and it's just an interesting crossroads for this character. If you grew up enjoying Chris Claremont kind of creating this character and her kind of coming of age and finding her own, this is a really fantastic miniseries. It's a really great celebration of the character of Kitty Pryde, of which I am a fan. But this is really finding her at just an interesting juncture in her time of life. She's kind of working at a bar, going to school. She's kind of learning things about science, and she's right in the heat of kind of interesting campus movements against mutants and things like that. So we have a lot of kind of bigotry and hatred that she is kind of the victim of and embroiled in. We get to see kind of her little network of community and friends. We have some old connections, and all of these things are brought up throughout that Mechanics miniseries. And honestly, this was a really fun inclusion. I think we know Claremont really has deep affection for Kitty Pryde, and you can definitely see that within this miniseries. Honestly, this was a huge highlight of this book for me. After we finish that miniseries, we do launch right into that X-Treme X-Men run again. We do have Cannonball joining the team at the end of Volume 1, and he's definitely in this early story arc, as is Wolverine and Sage and a couple others. This was a really fun one, though. Tons of action in the early story arc, and you kind of get your bearings again with these characters. Interestingly enough, one of these early stories as well is this sequel to God Loves, Man Kills, which is a really prolific X-Men storyline, one of my favorites actually. This sequel maybe is not quite as good as the original, but it's still fun seeing some returning characters and things like that. I don't think you had to have read that first series to enjoy this, but certainly you should if you are an X-Men fan and have an opportunity to do so. After that, we just bounce around with different missions for the X-Treme X-Men team. We have in the roster characters like Storm and Rogue and Gambit and Bishop and Sage and Wolverine and Cannonball and more. We definitely have a lot of roster shakeups throughout this book, though. I won't really go into too many spoilers here. Suffice it to say, you do get kind of an inflow, outflow of characters, and you do have kind of side missions. Like there's whole periods of time where Storm's by herself, or with Gambit, or Rogue's over here, or the rest of the team is over here. So even within the X-Treme X-Men, you almost have these different locations and factions or subgroups within the main team. And I think overall, this volume felt a little more spread out and less focused than what we got in Volume 1. And that's not necessarily detrimental, it's just something to note as you read this collection. I felt like the team was kind of spreading out and doing their own thing a little bit more than in Volume 1. But it also had a lot of great character exploration for some of these characters by focusing on smaller groups or different dynamics and splintered teams, things like that. Art-wise for this omnibus as well, we no longer have the art of Salvador Larroca from Volume 1, outside of a couple of covers here. We do have Bobbio and Cordy on art, and while I say they have a different visual style than Larroca did, you still very much have this kind of time and place character models for the most part, so I didn't feel that pulled out of what X-Treme X-Men was already doing, but that should just be noted in the art direction as you make your way through. At the back of the omnibus, as you've just seen, we had a small handful of extras, mostly just art, original art prints, outline, character models, things like that. I will say the actual extra section was a little bit shallow. I was hoping for maybe a bit more, but still nice to have some included here at the back. And that really is your overview of X-Treme X-Men Omnibus Volume 2. If you're hoping to pick up your own copy, I highly recommend checking out, of course, organicpricedbooks.com. And if you want a fuller, more in-depth review of this actual omnibus, please check out my channel, The Comic Book Report, in the coming weeks. I'll definitely try to release it with a little bit more of my thoughts. Maybe I'll go into spoiler territory a little bit more, and just examine a bit. Maybe I'll do a comparison with the Volume 1, things like that. And that's going to do it. Thanks, everyone. Bye.